I get a call from him. He's like, someone's on your property. I was like, what?
Really?
Well, Sam and I
How did you know? Did you have trail cams or?
No.
Ran into him.
Ran into him.
Oh.
And
that's the problem with not living there.
So they're
Exactly.
they were going to the back in the property. I'm like, hey, I'll go high left because Sam and I, his girlfriend, we're going to go look for some bears. And come around the corner in the side-by-side, and there's two people right there. I'm like, I don't know exactly where the line is for the property, but I'm pretty sure like it's within 100 yards of where I'm at right now. And so I pull up on it because I'm, trying to look at it, and I'm having trouble for some reason. I don't know why. So I call him. They come around, and him and Josh Fields and I forget who, or Josh's cousin showed up and talked to the guys, and they actually came in from behind them, and they said, "What? Like, oh, we're camping here." And it had to be like 200 yards from your property line.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're pretty much like the line is a rug,
Right?
And they said they actually did. They kind of fucked us on that day, but they did us a favor because I mean they pushed probably 200, a herd of 200, literally just straight onto me.
Yeah, and that's typically what happens with public around you.
And I asked them, I was like, "What the fuck's your plan here? Like, you kill one, like you're not going that way. You had to take that shit all the way over 2 mountain ranges,
right?"
And they're like, "Yeah, we've thought about it."
And I looked that up. I think it was like 7 miles as a crow flies,
There's some
or
shit,
something
too.
like that.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah. I
Two
mean,
dudes?
you pack it. Yeah, you pack an elk. I mean, a lot of people say like, "Oh, I went in 10 miles hunting," and it's like, well, you better be glad you didn't kill an elk.
Oh shit!
Like,
I mean,
that's some serious shit.
I was carrying the hind corners to the side-by-side 200 yards, and it was difficult.
Yeah.
Do you have like a ranch manager or somebody that lives there on place?
There's a rancher that's below me that he watches.
Leases, like, does he run some cattle on it?
Yeah,
or-
yeah. So he runs. I let him run cattle for 2 months up on me. And he pulls them off in August before the season. But he keeps a pretty good eye. And
That's what I was telling Joe Rogan when I was talking to him, because he would like to have a place up there. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you need to find, like, I've been finding a couple places and texting them to him, but I don't know exactly what he's looking for.
Yeah.
Because you can go anywhere from pretty simple stuff to, I mean, it's, guys, I don't know if you want to spend $5 million or $35 million
Exactly.
or $50 million.
Exactly.
You can do it all.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, the one I sent him was fucking 110 million. Like, it's like, I don't know what your budget is, bud.
But this one looks halfway decent.
Let's start high. See,
Yeah.
we can always go down.
But the thing is, I told him the key is you got to have a really solid, and I know a guy there that manages a ranch locally, that they run it like they own it. They've been on it for actually 2 generations now.
Yeah.
And you need to find someone like that will that's trustworthy, that can live on it, treat it like it's theirs. I said, but also when you come in, don't fucking tell him how to run the cattle. Just, you know, and it can work really, really good.
Oh, yeah.
But you got to have somebody on that land or else that's what you get.
Exactly. And my neighbor, he runs of the ranch. It's like 10,000. I've got 3. He's got like 10,000. And he keeps a very close eye. They do not play around.
Yeah.
All right, folks, if you haven't noticed, we have Josh Smith from Montana Knife Company on our podcast today. I appreciate you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're just bullshitting about public and private land hunting, and what Jay was alluding to, his neighbor not fucking around when it comes to people on the property.
Keith, my guy.
I saw those 2 guys we just talked about, and then they made themselves scarce for the most part. And then Keith saw a couple other guys, right?
Heath.
Sorry?
Heath.
Heath,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Saw a couple other guys.
And they were on their property, and I mean,
Tell him how he got him.
huh?
Tell him how he got him.
I think it was his partner, and he called him in, didn't
He
he?
got in a tree and used a cow call.
Oh, really?
Called him in
And hopped out and grabbed one of the guys. The other guy took off running.
took off sprinting.
Really?
Yeah.
So he calls the game
That's
warden
awesome.
and has pictures of both guys. But
Yeah.
what I was thinking they did initially, I'm like, there's no way these guys walked 7 miles through this country to get here, right?
Right.
So I think they just offloaded on the hardball there at nighttime and just cut right through everyone's property and got on that end. I think that was their
Maybe.
I think that was their game for getting out of there also. But
Yeah. Yeah, that's That's the tough part about being a landowner of a big chunk of ground, whether you live there or you don't. I mean, you got people sneaking in.
Yeah, you can't cover it all.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah, pull hard. Yeah, so it's one of those deals, and people they sneak in at night. It's kind of the unfortunate part that ruins the reputation for hunters, especially like with local landowners. You know, I have a cousin that managed a big ranch in Montana for a long time, and he would give people permission and say, you can park here, don't drive in, blah blah blah, and then they'd knock on his door at 3 a.m. We're stuck about 4 miles up. It's like, what the hell?
What part didn't you understand?
Yeah,
Park
exactly.
Here.
So he manages a big ranch now in eastern Montana, but he told those people when he went to work for him, I'll run the cows, but I'm not dealing with hunters. So unfortunately, we as hunters kind of sometimes ruin our own reputation a little bit. But the vast majority of people are great.
Yeah.
It just takes 2 jackasses a year
Yeah.
to screw it up.
Exactly.
And, it's, I'm just going to play a little devil's advocate here, like those guys that got stuck up on your buddy's mountain there, and like you hunt so hard and you see these elk and it's like, oh, it's just another 100 yards, just another 100 yards.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you're breaking the law.
Right.
But it's easy. It's easy to do in the heat of the moment when you see, a massive deer, elk, whatever. Is it right? No. But I can understand the thought process and why someone would do it,
When I was a kid growing up, I mean, you didn't have onX maps.
Yeah.
So sometimes you could just legitimately, a lot of times there's not a fence line in the middle of nowhere that designates the difference between Forest Service and private.
Yep.
And you could pretty legitimately end up where you shouldn't. And like you say now, you're chasing a big bull and it's bugling and you keep getting closer to that line. And it does get to be a difficult kind of moral dilemma for somebody where they're like, boy, that bull's only 100 yards onto that guy's property and he owns 10,000 acres.
Yeah.
Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
But, I mean, it is his property.
Have you met Bill Thompson?
Yeah, Spartan Forge.
We had him on last week. And
that dude's a brain.
Oh, my God.
Are you kidding me?
He's a genius.
He is a genius.
We just sat over here like, I didn't even know what to say.
No.
We were kind of dumbfounded. I was like, I need a dictionary.
Yeah.
I knew I was dumb, but I found a whole other level of dumbness.
Likewise.
We went to lunch with him afterwards, and he's an interesting dude.
Yeah.
No, he's a guy that belongs in a think tank.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But I've been messing around with Spartan Forge, and I love that app.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's tough. I just got it on my phone, and I've been playing with it a little. It's kind of like switching from an Android to an Apple. And it takes a little while to figure out the movements and stuff, but the stuff that he's developing and talking about, it's
he was
bonkers.
talking about with us doing like an algorithm, and it hooks to your cameras, and then he can kind of tell you, hey, this deer is going to be potentially here at this time, this place.
Yeah, it starts like basically doing a bunch of algorithms to give you the best chance to be in the right
that's
spot.
exactly what it was. It was AI based. For example, they have collared deer, and then you have your game cameras and your cellular game cameras, and they can all start talking to each other. Then this machine can start learning their pattern, and also it becomes predictable.
All right, we're talking about everything but Montana Knife Company.
Well, that's all right. The deal he was talking about where, if we're 3 of us are hunting together and we're kind of broke up a little bit or whatever, and an elk bugles, and the fact that it can triangulate off of all of us and place a pin on a map where that bull's standing. I mean, some of that stuff, it's just
it's wild.
Wild. Yeah.
So born and raised in Montana?
Yeah, pretty much. Born actually in Colorado Springs, but my folks moved to Montana when I was 6 months old. So
whereabouts in Montana?
I grew up in Lincoln,
Montana.
It's in the mountains there between Helena and Missoula. I always tell people, home of the Unabomber.
Is it?
Timothy McVeigh and you.
Old Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, Ted Kaczynski.
McVeigh was the Oklahoma City guy.
Oh, okay.
No,
that's close.
Kaczynski, he had his cabin on my buddy's ranch, and
no shit.
Yes, where our gravel pit. My folks, I grew up in excavation, so we would drive our dump trucks by him on the road all the time. Dust him out on his bicycle. My dad said we're lucky we didn't get a package. But
there's a documentary. Have you seen the documentary on Netflix? It's actually pretty good.
That one of the one where it comes from the angle of the investigator.
Yeah,
that's a good show. Yeah, but it was funny. He, I mean, that's a town of like 1,500 people, small logging town.
Yeah,
and when they announced, I think I was a junior in high school, junior or senior, but when they announced that they caught the Unabomber in your town, you start making a list of people you think are the Unabomber. He's not on that list. Oh, he wasn't? No. I mean, he's a hermit up in the middle of nowhere. You're more like, well, I don't know, Bill down the road. He's kind of crazy.
He was super smart too, wasn't he?
Oh, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he was like a genius.
Yeah, he was I think Harvard.
Yeah, he was
Brown
something. It was something.
Educated. No, he was genius.
Yeah.
Mathematician guy or something.
Yep.
I didn't know this.
And the only reason they caught him was because his brother, reading some letters, kind of noticed that the writing was real similar to the the manifesto. And I think his wife was like, "Huh? Your brother's the Unabomber."
Oh, his brother turned him in.
Yeah. The FBI was never going to find that guy.
Yeah. No.
They were so far off. Because that show you're talking about, if it's the same one, I mean, they were not even close.
No, yeah.
Is he in jail now?
Yeah. He's been in prison in Sacramento, federal prison.
Really?
Did they put him to death, or was that
was California?
That was Oklahoma City.
He actually, I think he might have just died recently, like this last year.
So I was doing some reading and research, and you started making knives at a very young age.
Yeah.
I was 11, Little League baseball.
Yeah.
Playing, and my coach was making knives.
And it sparked your curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, what 11-year-old doesn't think knives are cool and guns?
Very true.
Especially in a place like Lincoln, Montana. But yeah, he'd bring knives to practice and show the parents, the dads, and he was an outfitter in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And my folks bought me one of his knives for Christmas. I mean, I really think mostly probably to kind of support him because he was kind of getting going at the time. And I was stoked about that. And then he invited me up to make a knife in his shop.
Did you grow up hunting too?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, my folks didn't hunt, but I was pretty fortunate. My uncle would take me, and then a couple random guys in town, one guy in particular, would pick me up and take me. I always tell people, man, if you hunt and you got like one of your son's best friend is constantly asking you questions, like take that kid hunting because my dad didn't hunt. We worked.
Yep.
And had those guys not been willing to take me, my life might be totally different. Between that and Rick inviting me up to make a knife at 11.
Yeah.
Same thing with me. My parents didn't hunt, or my father didn't hunt. No one hunted, but one of my best friends, his dad hunted. And I was super curious, so he started bringing me duck hunting and pheasant hunting. Then I think it was 4th grade or 5th grade, we did the hunter safety course, and that's how I really got into it.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. Take a kid hunting.
I don't know how I didn't die when I was a kid because I would buy like a tree stand at a garage sale, and I went and hung them. I actually asked my dad a couple years ago, I'm like, how did you, because now I have kids, and I'm like, I don't understand. I would never just let my kid at 12, 13 go climb a tree with a tree stand. And I would like take nails out of my dad's like nail shed and like stick them in a tree and get up there. And somehow I got my tree stand strapped to a tree. I don't know how, no harness, no. And my dad was like, well, wasn't, Bruce and Carl were the guys I used to hunt with. He's like, well, didn't Bruce or Carl like help you put them up? I'm like, no, I was just out there on my own, just
figuring it out.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So at that young age, did you mainly big game hunt? Squirrel hunt?
Yeah. Deer hunt, deer and elk. And then shot my first elk when I think I was like 13 or 14 with my uncle. And then deer hunted a lot. I could walk out from my folks' place kind of into the river bottom and just bow hunt. Then my buddy and I coyote hunted a bunch. We would chase coyotes with pickups when we were in high school. And, I mean, there's no more fun
That's
than
just
that.
good old American fun. You know what I mean?
Again, I don't know how I broke my friend's nose on the dash of my truck hitting an irrigation ditch. And we had a lot of fun.
But I drew my first elk tag this year.
Really?
I've never shot an elk.
In Montana?
Anywhere.
No, but you drew it up in Montana?
Yeah, correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So super, super stoked for that.
Yeah, it's so much fun. But yeah, no, I was surrounded by some hunters, and Rick taught me to make a couple knives in my shop or his shop, and then he kind of told me if you want to be a knife maker, you got to have your own shop, which is his way. I think saying, kid, you need to beat it.
Yeah,
like
I showed you enough. Go figure it out.
Go do it. And honestly, I just stuck with it. And just something. something about it. I don't know what it was, but also the fact that, I sold a couple of my first knives, like for $20 to my science and math teachers. And it's like, well, I can make knives and get paid.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so I really just kind of stuck after it all the way through school.
What material did you start with? Because I know some guys have tried to get into knife making on deployment just as something to do to kill time.
Yep.
And I believe the guys would start with railroad pins. I don't know what.
Right, railroad spikes and stuff like that. Yeah.
They would start with those and some other, raw material and just bang the shit out of it and, hope for the best and have a grinder.
Yeah, when I was young, Rick taught me actually how to do stock removal first, which is just taking a pattern that you draw and putting it on a piece of steel and scribe it out and then grind out the pattern. I didn't forge, and especially being a kid like that, forging a blade is tough, and it would have been hard. So
what is that? What is that process?
Forging.
Yeah.
I mean, heating the steel up. Okay. People have seen like that show Forged and Fire on TV. Heating the steel up, pounding that blade into shape.
Yep.
And the reason for that, if you look at the last few hundred years, back then they didn't have fancy belt grinders and belts and band saws. It was the best utilization of the steel. So you could take a railroad spike and turn it into something else.
Yeah. Instead
of just throwing it away. Today we throw things away, recycle it.
Yep.
And you could make quite the shapes of things out of a piece of steel that you normally, if you just cut it out or grind it, you would need a big piece of steel.
Okay.
And so there's advantages to forging from like a steel utilization standpoint. And I started forging more when I was like probably 13, 14. But those first couple years, Rick just said, you need to learn how to grind and heat treat and like grind a handle, finish it. When you start to forge, once you get done forging, you're bad at it. So then you go to the grinder and you have to fix all your problems. And so you just compound your issues.
Yeah.
So as a kid, and really any knife maker, I tell them, start out with a nice flat piece of steel, learn how to grind. And frankly, the most important thing is heat treat. If you can't harden that steel, like a railroad spike, you can't harden it. It doesn't make a good knife. So I tell people, if you're going to go to all that work, go buy an actual decent piece of steel at the store for $10 that is good steel. So if you actually do a good job of making this knife and you heat treat it, it turns into a useful tool.
What do you mean by heat treat?
When you harden the steel. So when you have a piece of steel and you're working on it, when it's in that soft state, it's easy to grind and do all that stuff to it. But when you go to use it, if you hit something hard like a bone or a knot in a piece of wood, the edge will like bend and deflect. So when you harden that steel, you heat it up to about 1500 degrees, called the critical temperature, and then you quench it in oil, or some steels you quench in water. And then that steel goes through a transformation by coming down so fast in temperature, it hardens the steel. Now, the problem at that point is the steel is too hard. It's now it's like a piece of glass. It's brittle. So you temper it. If someone says, hey, temper your attitude, it means bring it down. You temper it in the oven and you heat that steel up to a certain temp, hold it for a little while. That brings that hardness down and it brings the toughness up, and you find this nice balance. So now you have a blade that can flex, it can bend, but it goes back. You can hit a bone and the edge won't chip. And you get a nice balance of wear resistance. And an example of that is like when I tested for my Mastersmith test, I did that at 19 years old. I did my journeyman at 15. You have to do a performance blade, and that's the first part of the test, because you can make the prettiest knife in the world. If it doesn't cut, it's a tool.
Yeah.
So you have to forge a 10-inch blade. You have to grind it, finish it all off, heat treat it. And then the first test is you have to cut a piece of rope in half, a 1-inch rope and one chop. That shows you that the knife's sharp. It doesn't really show you a lot about heat treat. At least you can sharpen a knife. Then you have to chop 2 2x4s in half, as many chops as you want, without resharpening. And when you get to the end of that, the rope and the 2 2x4s, that knife still has to shave when it's done. And so that shows you've heat treated that blade well enough to where you have wear resistance. That blade took a pounding that whole entire time, and it didn't chip out, which means it wasn't too hard. If you go through a knot or something, it didn't bend or deflect. If there's any damage to the edge, you fail. And then when you're all done with that, you have to bend that blade 90 degrees in a vise without breaking it. Yeah.
What?
So
youngest bladesmith
I was reading it
in the world.
Yeah, I was reading
That's impressive.
I was reading it yesterday.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, you're 11, 12 years old and you kind of already knew what you wanted to do with your life. Was there any point where you're like, maybe I want to do something else?
Not really. I mean, I grew up in excavation. We had a good business there, and I always just kind of thought I would probably take my dad's business over and then also make knives. And that's a seasonal business. In Montana, you're not doing any digging after November till April. So it's like, well, I'll make knives in the winter. But honestly, once I got out of high school, I never thought I'd get married till I was 30. And then, I think at 21, I ended up married. So, derailed that. And, when her and I got married, we moved to Missoula. She was a school teacher. And kind of decided not to chase the excavation path. But all these other knife makers, these old guys were telling me, don't make knives for a living. It's a hard way to go. It's like, just keep it a hobby. And of course, I was becoming pretty well known in the knife industry, and I was youngest master bladesmith and had all this coverage. And I was selling knives in my early 20s for $2,000 or $4,000 a piece, and getting a lot of national recognition. And of course, I thought, well, I'm different. I can go full time and make it. And so I did. I went full time when I was about 21 or 20, and I found out over the next 10 years, and I ended up having 4 kids. And when you're making one $4,000 or $5,000 knife at a time, it's like art, right? And if you screw that thing up 2 weeks in, you just lose that time. Yeah. Or if you want to go hunting for a week, you take a week off, you're not making any money. And it's just it's a struggle. It's a tough way to go. And when the kind of the economy of 08, 09 started happening, by 2010, my 3 or 4 year backlog was down to about 3 months because people are taking $5,000 knives out of their budget. They're like, I'm going to wait. And I started realizing, and at that time, you listen to the news, like we're headed into depression. It's the end of the world. And so I'd been teaching a buddy of mine how to make knives that worked for the power company. And he had a 401k and paid vacation and, double time on overtime and like all these things that sounded great. And so I actually went to work there. I got a job operating backhoe at doing excavation. Thought I was going to be a welder. And I ended up actually getting an apprenticeship on the electric side. And I became a journeyman lineman working on power lines. Wow.
That's a long journeymanship program, isn't it?
It's 3.5 years. Yeah. And so I did that apprenticeship, kind of put knives aside, got divorced, my house burned down.
Really?
Yeah. And so I was living in a camper in my driveway during my apprenticeship for my lineman stuff. And shit was not going good.
How'd your house burn down?
It blew up. Yeah. I did. It's
on purpose.
My buddies. Yeah. I learned from Ted Kaczynski.
I was going to bring it back.
Oh, trust me. My buddies are like, yeah, you and Uncle Ted. No, I actually, one morning I was living in a trailer and, on my property there, and I had a gas line going to the stove that was all looked really sketchy, and I was worried it was going to break. So one morning before work early, I was going to be working out of town. I'm like, well, I'm going to take that gas line off and have the guys at work rebuild a new line. I'll put it back on. Went out, shut the propane tank off, came back in, got in through the cupboards in these shitty trailers, found the line, took it off, and headed out for work. And as I was leaving, fed the horses, and as I was leaving, I'm like, I didn't turn that tank back on. Drove back in, turned the tank on, left. And we're loading power poles about 6:30 in the morning, 7, and my 70-year-old boss comes running across the parking lot on the ice in his boots. It's early March, ton of snow on the ground. Your fucking house is on fire. And there's like 7 of us that are standing there going, Who's? Josh, your house is on fire. I'm like, oh shit. I run to the truck and get my phone, and I have like 120 missed calls. I mean, everybody's calling me, 911's calling, and the neighbor had told the fire department that I had kids in that house. Yeah. So they're chopping holes in the walls trying to get in, and I told them, tell them to get out. My kids are at my ex-wife's, like, don't risk your life on that thing. And so the whole way driving home 20 miles, you could just see a plume off on the horizon. And it's like, that's my house. Like, that really sucks. You just stare at that plume the whole way home. So it was actually my fault. Just dumb mistake. I didn't find the shutoff in the house, and it just got past me. And so when I turned that tank back on, it was just running gas in the house.
What sparked it?
Wood stove.
Really?
Yep. And yeah, that was a bummer. So I ended up buying a fifth wheel camper, parked it in the driveway, was living in that with my kids, and started to rebuild. And I wasn't making much for knives at that point. I was single, still doing the apprenticeship thing. And so over the next few years, I got through my apprenticeship, made a knife here and there. But I always had this dream of starting Montana Knife Company. And I'd actually registered the name when I was 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I had talked to my buddy. So my whole time I was a lineman, we'd be up in the bucket truck working on power lines. And a particular buddy of mine, Dave Kennedy, he was my foreman. We would talk like, we got to get out of here. We got to start our own business. How can we make money and hunt? And he had ideas. And I kept talking about Montana Knife Company, so much so that I think most of my friends thought it was completely full of it. And when I met my new wife in 2016, over the next year or so, I started telling her this idea I wanted to do. And she was like, well, you should quit your job and do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, slow down. And so actually her dad passed away in 17 and she gave her 18 and we inherited like 20 grand from that. And she's like, take that money and just buy steel and start your business. And so I ordered some steel. I didn't know how to make, I remind you, I was making $5,000. I mean, I made a sword for 36 grand. Like I was making high-end knives.
Yeah.
So to start a production knife company,
it's a whole different ballgame.
I had no idea what I was doing. And so I ordered some sheets of steel, had some blades cut, and I started making prototypes. And I actually took those prototypes out to Bert Soren's the beginning of 2020 out to Winterstrong and was showing them around to some people in the industry. And they were just super supportive. And they're like, yeah, you should do this. And so
who was the competition at that point then? Was it,
Benchmade?
Well, there were a lot of big companies, Benchmade. There's a ton of companies. Yeah. Spyderco and SOG and there's a ton, but in my mind, the opening that I saw all along, and I think it actually got more and more open, was the hunting area.
Yeah. Because
none of these companies I felt like actually were hunters or would talk to hunters or would post about hunting. And I actually saw as the world was getting a little bit more woke, people were scared to post a picture of a dead black bear on their Instagram page. Benchmade's not going to do that.
No.
And I also started seeing the replaceable blade, like throwaway knife, becoming a thing.
Yeah, Havalon.
And it was bothering me. Yeah, Havalon or whatever, Outdoor Edge. And as men, generally, we've passed down knives and guns for generations. Knives, guns, maybe cars. Women, like art, jewelry. And I was seeing, over the years, for 30 years, people would bring knives into my shop and be like, hey, my grandpa was, a SOG warrior in Vietnam, and this was the knife he carried. Or, my uncle, was a guide in Alaska. And I would sharpen knives. It didn't matter what the knife was. It mattered who owned it.
Sure.
This is my grandfather's pocket knife. He carried it every day. It's the only thing I have of his. And I was seeing that our generation was starting to throw away the things that down the road our kids will actually care about.
Yeah.
When you're 35 and you're doing your thing, you're not thinking about 60 years from now, who's going to have that. And also I was seeing more and more knives being produced overseas. And I'm like, knives should be made in America. We should be passing them down. It's a tool. And that was kind of the idea behind Montana Knife Company. And so I said, well, I'm gonna launch a hunting knife brand. We're gonna make the knives in America, and we're going to, we're actually hunters, and we're gonna market. We're gonna launch this knife not in the knife community, but in the hunting community. And so that summer of 2020, which was COVID year, we went to Burt's in February, showing those prototypes around, and like as we're coming home, COVID's becoming a thing, and a couple weeks later, it's everywhere.
Yeah,
and over that next month or two, I was talking to my wife, and it was like back in 2008, 9, 10, when the world was ending, I kind of changed my career path, worried about the world.
Yeah.
And I was like, this time I'm ignoring it. Like, I'm just going to do my thing.
Yeah.
And through that Winter Strong event, I met Brandon, my business partner now. I just needed somebody to take photos and build me a website.
Yeah.
And I started realizing how good he was and how much he knew about marketing and everything. So by that fall of 2020, we actually officially partnered up. I basically was like, I can't afford to pay you, but there's something here. And so I gave him part ownership in it and like a significant amount to where it was like, either this is going to go, we're both going to do well, or it won't.
Yeah.
And so we launched our website the first morning of the Big Sky TAC of 2020. And I went to that TAC and knew, but I didn't know a soul. And started introducing myself, gave a couple knives out. And, you know, the hunting community was so generous and kind. They just kind of accepted us and did a couple TACs. And throughout that rest of 2020, man, it started to grow. And my wife kept saying, you need to quit your job. And so basically January 1st of 21, I quit.
How many knives did you have at that point?
I'd probably made 200.
Okay.
Yeah, because that was kind of the first like jaunt into this. I'm like, well, I'm going to make 200 knives. And that, to me, that was a lot.
Yeah.
And man, I was figuring out like, you know, I'd make one and I'd be like, well, that was fast. Because I was used to taking a month to make a knife. And I was like, well, that was fast. Well, then you do it 200 times and you're like, man, if I want to do 1,000, this is not going to work.
How long would it take you to spit out a knife then?
Basically, I mean, I was doing them in batches. So I don't know, say 20 in a week.
Okay.
And, you know, I was hand grinding them. My 14-year-old daughter at the time, she's now 18 and graduating, she was helping me hand grind them. And it was a funny story. One day I come home from work. It's summertime of 2020, and my wife's like, Sadie ground like 60 handles today. And I'm like, that's amazing. Thanks. And so I go out to my shop, and every one of them are ground like with an angle across the top, like not good. So I like ground all night long to fix them all. But then I was realizing like I'm hand grinding these, every sheath now doesn't fit. And I just had so many problems.
Yeah.
But Brandon and I we dropped those 200 and they sold. And then we would take that money and we would make a couple hundred more, and we'd go weeks and frankly a couple months without a knife drop.
Yeah.
And I just started learning and changing the process the whole time. And so January 1st of that 21, I quit. And I didn't take a paycheck that whole first half of that year, neither Brandon nor I. Then I had a high school kid that was graduating I hired to kind of help part-time in 21. And things started ramping up. And man, by the end of 21, we were rolling.
Yeah.
It had a couple employees, you know, so by the start of 22, and now we're in partway through 24, and we've got 56 employees. So
fast start.
Yeah.
Do you have the knife that you went through that test with that you bent at 90 degrees?
I do. Yep.
Is it still bent at 90 degrees? Or
yeah, it's still no. No, when you bend that blade 90 degrees, a good heat treated blade will kind of come back a little ways, but it's still bent.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And 10-inch blade. What type of handle was on it?
Well, it's funny. My journeyman test, it's just the test blade.
And you did that at 15?
At 15, that one had duct tape on it.
What is that?
No shit.
Yeah, because
they didn't care about the handle.
The second part of that test that I didn't tell you about is once you pass the performance test, you take 5 finish knives down to the Atlanta Blade Show and you present them to a panel of judges. And they judge your fit and finish. How pretty are they? Okay. You know, do you fit your hand material up tight and your pins, and is the wood cracked, or is the blade ground well? So that performance blade didn't matter.
Gotcha.
Now, when I did the Master Smith, I put a handle on. It was a little different. But yeah, so I did that at 15 and then at 19. So like at 19, you present these 5 knives. They have to basically be perfect. One of them has to be a Quillian dagger. They have to be Damascus steel. That's a tough test. And I think when I did that, there were like around 80 in the world at that point. Now there's 150 or something.
Really?
So you wanted your tent pole to be, you know, a knife for the working man, for hunters. Your first knife, the first concept, what was that concept?
Yeah, it was kind of basically like our Blackfoot knife that we have now. I have a bunch of those laying around my shop. I was making prototypes, and the reason for that was I want to make a hunting knife that can do kind of anything, right? You could if you want to take it fishing, that's why I called it the Blackfoot. I grew up in the Blackfoot River Valley. So I fished a deer hunt, elk hunt, bear hunt, you know, moose are there. I wanted to make a knife that, and I also believed, and this was a lot of what I was seeing missing from companies, a hunting knife doesn't have to be big and heavy.
Correct.
It can be light, thin, like our Speed Goat knife's ounce and a half.
I love that
1.7. And yeah, Cole Kramer uses that thing to
that's great.
to break down bears and on brown bears in Kodiak. If you heat treat the blade well, and that's the thing, going back to that test, if you know how to heat treat a piece of steel, it can be thin but strong. Now, granted, that's not a pry bar. I mean, you can break it if you're going to pry. But if you're going to use that thing to cut, also, I would hear people say, like, I suck at sharpening, and then they hand me a blade that's like crazy thick. It's like, well, when you're sharpening, you're taking steel away from that edge. If there's a ton of steel behind that edge, you're going to struggle. A blade that thin, it's going to be really easy to resharpen. A few passes and you're back going. And so I think part of it was an education process of telling hunters, like, you don't need a big, heavy blade. And so like that first Blackfoot knife we put out, it's like, no, you can break down an entire elk with this little knife. And also people count ounces, right? If you're hiking in the backcountry, you don't need all that extra weight, you know? So that was kind of the idea.
What is the best way for like a novice to sharpen a knife?
Yeah. So, like a little knife like that.
Just asking for a friend.
We're actually coming out with a stone with Work Sharp this fall, but a little packing stone, but a little small diamond to carry in your pack if you want to do a little touch up. And then if it gets into at some point, like every knife's going to go dull, right? And it's going to finally get to a point where like, okay, a little diamond isn't going to do it. I need a bigger stone. I like a nicer, bigger bench stone back at home. And people can watch the YouTube video on how I do it. It's actually different than the way most people sharpen, but a nice stone at home, follow that video of mine and learn how to sharpen. And you kind of need that bigger, heavier stone. And there's a couple different grits. You know, you start with a rougher grit, get the edge close, and then refine it with a fine grit. But that's the other part of it is we'll resharpen any knife that we sell for free for life.
Yeah, I've seen you guys at TAC over there sharpening knives. Yeah.
So I tell people, if it gets to a point where you're struggling to get it the way you want it, please send it back because I would rather you have that thing razor sharp for next season than decide like, well, that's dull, I'm going to grab another knife. A friend of mine, when I was starting the company, he's like, dude, you're going to go broke sharpening knives that people are sending back. I'm like, well, if I've sold that many knives, we're doing all right.
Yeah, like, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah. And Tristan in our shop, any Generations knife that comes in, the day he gets it, every day he checks the mail. First thing, he sharpens them, he'll rewrap them, you know, replace the sheath if it needs it or whatever, and send it back that day. Wow. Because I don't want people to be, you know, a lot of these guys make their living like this. Outfitters, guides, you know, chefs. So like, we get that knife, it goes back out the same day, at the latest the next day. And so you're without it for a few days.
When you say little diamond, what do you mean by that?
There's diamond stones. It's like crushed crystalline diamond that they adhere to like a steel plate, real fine. It's a dry method. You don't have to use oil or water or anything.
What about the little contraptions that have the suction cup on the bottom that you pull through?
There's
ceramic. X?
I'm not a huge fan of some of those pull throughs. I mean, there's 100, 500 different sharpeners. A lot of the pull throughs I'm not as big of a fan of. I would prefer people to kind of learn how to sharpen correctly with a stone because you have a little more control over the process. It's funny. I was at Steve Renella's house a few weeks ago, and we had dinner. And then he's like, hold on. He walks out in his garage. He brings out sharpening stone and one of our knives that was dull as hell. And he's like, teach me how to sharpen on his kitchen counter.
I've used the Work Sharp like belt sander. Do you guys use a similar process when someone sends them in? Like I say belt sander, but you know what I'm talking about.
We're using a belt grinder in our shop just with the numbers that we do.
Yeah, of course.
When I go and teach at places, I'll teach off of a stone because that's how someone's going to do it. Those Work Sharp belt sanders are really, really good for most knives. What I caution people against using them on our knives when our knives are new or like a Speed Goat or something because the edges are already so thin. You can take a lot of material off. Now, those work sharp belts, the reason they're so popular is what I said earlier. A lot of these blades are so thick and heavy, and they've been sharpened down for so many years that the belt is actually taking off a lot more steel. If you try to take that much off with a stone, you'd be there for hours. And that's what, like, people walk in my shop, and I'm like, I'll just go right to my belt grinder. And I'll even ask people, you know, if it's grandpa's old knife that means a lot, I won't regrind it. I want to leave it kind of as it is. I'll just get it sharp. But if it's just some factory knife that doesn't matter, I'll regrind the entire blade down to the edge geometry it should have.
Really?
And sharpen it, and it makes all the world of difference. Yeah.
What's your favorite knife to carry out of all the ones that you've made?
It depends a little bit on what I'm hunting. Either a speed goat or like our Blackfoot, or the biggest knife I'll carry is that whitetail that I just gave you. Like for bigger game, like I'm going on a moose hunt this fall.
Whereabouts?
I'll probably take a whitetail. Going up with Dustin Rowe up in British Columbia.
Oh, nice.
I'm taking my son, my 15-year-old son. We're going to go hunt. So.
Have you gotten a moose before?
I did when I was 20. I paid for a moose hunt from the time I was about 17. I would send this guy like $100 a month. No and kidding. When I was 20, I went to Canada. It was actually in 2001, right after 9/11. I remember it very well because I was worried I wasn't going to get into Canada with a gun. Yeah. It was sketchy for a couple weeks if I was going to go. But I went moose hunting up there. But that moose mount blew up in my house.
Oh shoot!
So I'm pretty excited to go and maybe get another moose.
I went to Maine a couple years ago. Didn't see a moose though.
Oh, really?
We walked 70 miles.
No shit.
5 days. Didn't see a moose.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Moose is on my bucket list.
I'm going in October. Where the hell am I going though? Is the question. My dad was supposed to go, but he doesn't think he can do it. Manitoba, maybe?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Way up north somewhere.
That northern BC, it's such special country, and it's so vast. It's unbelievable.
What's that moose hunt look like? Is it a spot and stock?
So we're going to fly into a small lake where there's a cabin, and then they're going to have about 20 head of horses there, and we're going to take, I think, about 10 head, and we're actually going to pack in. So it'll be 2 guides, a couple packers, and myself and my son, and maybe an extra horse just for packing or mule. And then they said we're gonna get on them horses and leave camp for 10 days and just camp off of the horses the entire time. So wherever we end up, we end up. So we're gonna basically ride ridges, and it's an earlier hunt. It's a velvet moose. It's mid-August.
Oh, that's super cool.
That's gonna be cool.
Yeah, and so they're not rutting right at that point. So it's a little more like a spot and stalk mule deer where you get up high and you're glassing those bottoms, and then once you find one, you got to figure out how to get close because you can't really call them in. And I'm taking my bow. My boy's going to take his bow, but I think we'll have a rifle in case it's one of those. Like, if I have to, I'll use a rifle. But yeah, they're just such big animals.
Did you shoot your last one with a bow?
No, rifle. Yep.
I'm taking a rifle.
After
my last moose hunt, I'm not messing around.
Yeah, gonna get one.
Yeah, if I see one.
And there's so many more moose up there.
Yeah.
And the challenge is it's just so brushy. You know, like getting close, getting a shot. That's a challenge with the bow. I mean, you get down in that brush. I remember we called in some moose on my first moose hunt that we didn't shoot, and you can hear them coming. And you hear that brush going, and then like they appear like 10 yards away. Finally, you can see them, and they're standing right there, and you're like, "Oh, not shooting that one." But you're standing there, like you don't know what's coming through the brush.
Do you and your son both have tags? Or do you have one?
We do.
Really?
Yep.
That's going to be epic.
Yeah, and he's a serious football player, and it's football season. He's quarterback. He's big. I mean, he just turned 16 this week. He's 6'4", 225 pounds. Oh. Like got an arm. Like he's an athlete.
So is he missing football for this?
He's gonna And I asked him, and he loves football.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, you're gonna miss like 10 days of season. And he's like, I'm going hunting.
How old is he?
And
16.
Which that's the only thing he would miss sports for because he's a sports fanatic. He's a hell of a basketball player too.
Nice.
So,
when did you get into making chef knives?
I will say about that, the reason he's doing it this year, he's going to be a sophomore. Getting him out of their junior senior year, like
possible.
Yeah, this is kind of like he knows this is like his last fall that he can kind of be gone, and then the team will be kind of on his back. But chef's knives,
yes, sir.
I made a couple when I was doing it as a custom maker, but really started those about a year and a half ago through with our production company with Montana Knife Company. You know, that's another thing, like. You see these chef's knives that people are buying, and that's another thing that you do see, like custom knives people passing down. But I see the knives people are using in their kitchen, and the biggest problem too is nobody that buys these chef's knives can send them back to be resharpened. And even though people are spending a fair amount on our knives, I think that idea that they can send them back and get them back as sharp as day one, you're going to buy one set of chef's knives for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like as long as we're around, we're going to sharpen those things. And the response has been incredible.
Yeah, they're sold out every time I look.
Yeah, we have a big drop of those. We have a big drop of those coming next week. I'm pretty excited about that.
Excellent.
Whenever you were 15 and you did the journeyman, like were your parents like we're going to Atlanta for this? Like did you prepare for this, or is this just like something?
Yeah, to do that test, you know, you have to be an apprentice for 2 years. Back then, now it's 3 years. But so I had to join the American Bladesmith Society when I was 12.
Wow.
And then I planned on it, worked towards it. I went to the Atlanta Blade Show. My mom came with me to that one. You know, I turned 12 or 13 at the Eugene, Oregon knife show just by myself with some knife makers. Like I just rode out in a car with them. It was
how times have changed. You know?
It was, yeah. I flew to Columbia, South Carolina when I was 14 on a standby ticket by myself, and I spent a week with a knife maker that I'd never met in his shop.
What?
Yeah. And no cell phones. I would, call my mom once in a while from their phone to let them know I was still alive. But it was just the knife community was
me and this old guy making knives.
Yeah, his name was
Mom.
George Heron. He's a legend. Passed away, quite a while ago, but he, the knife community was just so good to me as a kid. The only reason I became so good so fast was because people are willing to teach and show me stuff.
Yeah.
And, you had to do that because that was before YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, that was in the 90s, 95 to 99 when I was in high school. You didn't just Google something.
Yeah.
Like you had to go ask somebody at a show, like, how did you do that? Or would you mind teaching me? Or can I come to your shop and learn? So I did a lot of that. I traveled around a lot as a kid, just learning. And it forces you as a kid to learn how to talk to strangers.
Yeah.
But by and large, the knife community was amazing, and it still is.
Damascus steel. Could you explain that to me? Because I see, this type of stainless steel, then I see Damascus steel. Yeah. And I know it's folded a bunch, but I don't know what makes it Damascus steel. Yeah,
people probably most famously know it. People always ask me, like, it's like the samurai swords, the samurai warrior swords, where they used to fold the steel over and over. And back then they thought that the more folds that you put into a piece of steel, the stronger it got. It's kind of this mythology to it. So we figured out later, it's really about metallurgy. It's about heat treating and what the elements are in the steel. But it's layers of steel that you forge over and over. And there again, the real reason behind that hundreds of years ago was like, okay, I need to make something that's this big, but I only have a bunch of pieces of steel that are this big. And so they figured out that if you put those together and heat it up to a certain temperature, it's about 2,400 degrees, 2,300. You heat it up, when you hammer it or you press it, it'll forge weld to itself, and it becomes one piece of steel. If you do it right, when you cut that steel in half, there's no line, there's no nothing. It's just one piece of steel. And so over time, people started realizing you can do that and control the patterns and whatnot to make it look really beautiful. An example would be like the old famous Damascus shotguns that you'd see with like the twisted barrels. And that art of that was really lost in the United States until the late 70s. And a few knife makers, Don Fogg and Steve Schwarzer and some of these guys out on the East Coast that are all now quite old, they started figuring out those techniques again and kind of brought those back, and it started to grow, and then it exploded in the US like in the 90s. And that's where the guys that taught me to make knives got quite well known for their Damascus steel. And like I won the best Damascus knife award at the Atlanta Blade Show when I was 20 years old with a crazy piece of Damascus. Because what it is simply put, like if you had red and yellow Play-Doh and you took alternating pieces of that and stacked it all up, if that Play-Doh didn't just mold together like it does, but if it stayed separate, as you draw that down and fold it or twist it, anything you do to it, it affects those layers. And you start to realize you can make patterns with steel. And so, I mean, I could put, Jay's name, literally, I can put pieces of steel together and pour powdered steel around and forge Jay into a blade. Like, it's amazing the control that you can have.
Really?
It's an art form that's just insane. And it's really hard to explain to people, like, why is that knife $5,000? And it's like, the amount of work that went in to get that blade, that forging, is incredible.
Is there a functional difference between, a steel knife,
yeah,
stainless steel knife,
there's
and a
not.
Damascus?
Yeah, there's not. And when I was growing up in the 90s, there still was this idea that there was, and even a forged blade. And there's still probably some old guys that, like, forged knife is better. Man, it's about what kind of steel is it to begin with and how do you heat treat it. There's not like a functional difference. Now, there's also, that doesn't mean that there's a drawback to it either. If you do your forging right and that piece of Damascus steel's out of the right alloys and you heat treat it well, I did my Master Smith performance test with, a Damascus steel blade. It'll chop, it'll bend. In the end, it's just steel, but it's got a pattern to it.
What's your favorite type of steel to use now? You don't have to say it if it's some proprietary information.
No, like for our production knives, our stainless, this Magna Cut steel is really incredible. Laren Thomas invented it. It's funny, when I turned 13 or whatever at the Eugene, Oregon show, a guy by the name of Devin Thomas shared his table with me. He was like, hey kid, you can have the end of my table. I set my little table covering on it, put my little knives out there for sale. And Devin was a commercial Damascus maker. He'd make and sell Damascus steel to other knife makers for them to use, the guys that didn't forge. And 40 years, 30 years later, at that point, Laren wasn't even born. Laren Thomas is born, becomes a full-on master metallurgist, and actually invented this steel for knife makers to use. Because most of the steels knife makers have been using over history are just steels that are already available. For example, ball bearing steel. Knife makers figured out, oh, that's a good steel for knives. Your question earlier about like using a railroad spike. Guys were using like spring steel out of cars because they figured out when you use that steel and you heat treat it right, it makes a great knife. Well, Laren invented this steel specifically for the knife industry with the properties that it needed to hold an edge well, be stain resistant, be tough, easy to sharpen. So he invented this steel back in 2021.
How the hell do you invent a steel?
That was my question too.
Yeah.
How's the guy go about doing that?
You got to be a lot smarter than me. Because it's
Bill?
Yeah, exactly. A guy, the equivalent of Bill that likes steel. Yeah, because it's a combination of all kinds of elements, manganese and chromium and carbon.
Yeah.
All these different elements together, and carbide, and they have all these different effects on the steel. So, and some of those properties make a steel hard. Some of them make them wear resistant. Some make them corrosion resistant. So it's, I have no idea.
Have you made any blades for any military units?
It's funny you asked that. We're actually launching our tactical line in July.
Really?
So not yet, even though quite a few guys actually carry like our Blackfoot and Speed Goat.
Yep.
But we're actually coming out with a line of tactical stuff designed specifically for those guys. I've been fortunate to get to be friends with, got a lot of guys in the military community. I mean, I didn't serve. I'm not a veteran, but fortunate to have been kind of accepted in that crowd a bit. Went out last year, took a bunch of prototypes to Brian Morgan's out at Hat Creek Training in Idaho. He has a ton of he trains the soft snipers across all branches. And he's constantly running teams through. Well, he invited us to a competition called the Nasty. It was all active duty snipers from all different.
Someone was asking me about this recently.
Dude, that was freaking badass. I mean, you watch those guys shoot. And
is that a thing when you were around?
Yeah.
It just started.
Yeah, Brian, I can't remember when he started. He wasn't in the military either. He was actually just a competitive long-range shooter that was crushing people. And some of the, I don't know what unit, or somebody said, hey, will you come work with our guys?
Is this the same guy that owns a bunch of land in up like near Lake Coeur d'Alene or somewhere like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yep. Just south of Coeur d'Alene.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And he's a gem of a person.
I've never met him. I hear nothing but great things.
Dude. Yeah. Amazing. But he invited us to just come watch and hang out with those dudes. And actually, that was right during the time when Israel popped off. In fact, a couple of the unit guys and I think one SEAL team actually had to leave, cut their competition short and jet. But I got to pass those knives around to those guys and just ask them. And it's funny. I used to think like I would ask a SEAL, somebody like yourself. I'd say, hey, what's the perfect knife? And I would expect that like 10 of you guys would all kind of give me the same answer.
Completely.
I mean, everybody's completely different. Yeah. And so that was actually a good learning curve. But those guys critiqued a lot of it. A lot of it's how they carry it, where they carry it on their kit, and what they're doing with it. One guy wants a pry bar to take lug nuts off of his freaking Humvee, and the next guy wants it to be 1 ounce and super light and just a razor blade. So it's like finding that balance.
Have you ever met Dave Winkler?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Dan Winkler.
Dan Winkler. That's
so Dan was a custom maker. His wife Karen, unbelievably cool people. I used to share a table next to them in Times Square in New York City. Not with them, but next to them. There was a custom show. They would bring all their custom stuff. And I remember Dan telling me, yeah, we're starting to do some work with some SEALs here and there, and some of his knives, and then his tomahawks, and it's super cool. That's why I say the knife community is filled with amazing people, and what the Winklers have done and how they've really been accepted by that military community is cool.
I know his knives are a prized possession that folks have and carry with them. Just like you said, they'll have, these guys will have them for life because they mean a lot to them, because they bring them on every deployment and so on and so forth.
Yep.
There's no way someone's getting rid of one of those knives.
No.
Yeah.
No, and honestly, in 50 years, when that guy's dead and gone and he's got a grandkid that's 20 years old, he's going to read back about, the GWAT and his grandpa that was there. And the only thing he's really probably going to have is that knife or tomahawk, or, he's probably not going to have his gun. He might have a little bit of his kit or something, but.
Did he start in knives and get into tomahawks, or vice versa? Because I just know a lot of people that have his tomahawks more so than his knives.
Yeah, he started, I think, more in knives. Okay. And then he was famous for doing like reproduction, like sinew type leather sheaths, and some of the, what do you call it? These guys will do like reenactments of like the Mountain Men days.
Yep.
And his wife is a master leather worker, so the two of them combined would make these amazing art pieces.
Dan Winkler?
Dan Winkler. Yeah, Winkler knives.
They're legit.
They are. They're awesome.
You guys carry tomahawks around?
Some guys do.
Yeah, the Sayok.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I always liked a smaller knife for getting in and out of vehicles. I carried a big one for a deployment or two when we weren't in Humvees. But when you get in a Humvee, I mean, you have so much shit on you.
Yeah.
The last thing you need is one more thing sticking out to get caught on something.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it. I mean, 99.999% of people aren't going to ever stab somebody with it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got that going on, you a lot of shit's gone wrong. But it's still possible.
It happens.
But it's more of a it's definitely more of a utility tool for cutting rope or opening MREs or whatever. But like in the end, I want to build that for worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Do you ever make put a serrated edge on any of your blood?
We haven't. Frankly, I'm not a big fan of them.
Why is that?
They're impossible to sharpen for people. I think a really good sharp edge. I mean, we can go cut rope all day long with those two knives, and a well sharpened normal edge will perform just as well. And it also limits some of your options with that part of the edge. So I feel like it's a little bit of a wasted section. That being said, 100% we will eventually come out with something, because enough people do. It's kind of like a gut hook. I don't like a gut hook, but a lot of people do. So I'm sure eventually we'll do one.
I'm not the biggest fan of gut hooks. You like them?
I've used them. I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
to me, it's a 10-second process, and then for the rest of the time, there's gut hook kind of in the way, catching on stuff, snagging on things like, But
how
those swing ones that kind of swing. Have you seen those?
Oh, where I think Outdoor Edge makes that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
kind of rotates open.
Two knives in one.
And that's where like I've seen some, we might even make one like a separate tool that's in your kill kit, pull it out, zip it open, and then maybe put it away. But I don't want my blade to have that on it.
What about folding knives?
We're working on, we're doing some engineering on a new locking mechanism. Hopefully next year we'll come out with them.
Is there spring loaded or no?
Not initially.
Is there legality hiccups that are in patents that are keeping you from doing certain things?
Yeah, that patent thing, you do have to be careful on whether it's the locking mechanism, the spring operated part of it. There's definitely a lot of like little patent issues and stuff like that you got to watch for. I'm more wanting to make sure we solve. There's a couple things with some of the most popular locks out there where they'll actually collapse if you slap the spine on the edge of something hard. Or there's a few things we're trying to kind of solve and do better. Also trying to solve a few of the things where if you get like fat and bunch of gunk and stuff down in that blade, that it doesn't affect the way that that mechanism works. So we're working through that. And a big part of the reason that we haven't been able to do that is this other part of our company's grown so much. We're just trying to meet that demand.
Yeah. Trying to keep up.
We can't even make enough hunting knives right now. Folders are a lot harder to make, so that's going to take more time, more people. And then we're actually buying land. We should be closing in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to start building a new production, manufacturing facility this fall. Hopefully move in mid next year, and that's when like the folding knife becomes much more, because we're out of space. We built this building in my horse pasture through the 2022, moved in January of 23, and today we're maxed on it. So even if we wanted to build folders right now, we couldn't, just from a production standpoint.
What about blades that are, I don't even know the terminology, both edges are sharp?
Yeah, kind of like a dagger grind.
Yeah.
I could see some of that being in the tactical space.
Okay.
I've built a lot of custom knives with what's called a false edge up there. If you have a sharp edge up there,
is that the edge that's just up top?
It is. Gotcha. Yeah. But it's not. There's a false edge, and then there's kind of like a double edge. There gets to be a little bit of risk with that, even in a tactical sense, where if I'm the guy using it, not that I'm some freaking knife fighter, but I'd like to know that there's one safe side for me, versus two sides that are sharp. But we are going to be building a dagger this year. We're coming out with a dagger this year that will likely be sharp on both sides.
I was thinking it more for, versatility. If one side starts getting dull, you flip it over and use the other side.
I guess you could, or you could just sharpen it.
Or you could just sharpen it. I got decent using a stone in buds. You get issued a knife, and it has to be razor sharp before every swim. You have knife inspections, and during the room inspections, they inspect your knife. So I got pretty decent with a stone doing that. But then again, I haven't done that in 20 years. Then I just went to the cheap, easy way.
I was going to ask you what kind of instruction you guys get with that.
We got zero instruction.
Just make this sharp.
We got I think it was a SOG. And about this size, maybe a little bigger. It was our dive knife.
So you just hope a classmate knows how to do it and can teach you?
I found, you find your local hillbilly that's in your class and gives everyone kind of a rundown. Then you just stay up all night figuring it out. Otherwise, you're going to get your shit pushed in the morning if it's dull.
Right.
So, but I really learned that whole process. Like, you need good stones. You need your coarse stone, then your fine stone, and your medium stone. And I was able to get really, really good at it.
Yeah.
Do I still have that skill, or was it with that just particularly with just that knife? I don't know, because I haven't done it since.
Yeah, I'm sure it would come right back.
Yeah.
That's thing, like back in the old days, people would sit around at night and just sharpen a knife just for something to do. I mean, you didn't have Instagram to look at. People definitely knew how to do it. And back then too, we live in a throwaway society. I mean, back then you weren't throwing a knife away.
Hell no.
That's one thing. Like, you walk into Target or any store and you look around and tell me how much you see in there that's not made to like throw away in the next 5 years. It's crazy.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything in those stores.
Yeah. And that's where, like, that's why I want people, like, yes, it costs us a little time and money to resharpen a knife. I want people to send them back to us. Like, drives me crazy when I get to somebody's house that's got a couple of our knives and they're both dull as hell. And I'm like, just throw them in a box and send them to me, please. Yeah. Like, because I want that to be something you grab and enjoy. It's also I can't tell you how cool it is. Like this has been a dream of mine for 20 years, this knife company. And so now when I get a DM from some random Joe and he took the time to take a photo of our knife on his dead deer or elk or like maybe the best day of his life.
Yeah.
He went, sheep hunting in Alaska. He saved up for it for 30 years. And he took the time to say in that moment, hold on, I'm going to take a picture of this knife and send it to Josh. That's pretty freaking cool. And to choose to take something of ours on a trip like that, it means a lot to me. It's a little sappy, but that's
awesome. Do any of your kids want to get into knife making?
Yeah, I think my boy's pretty interested in the knife company part, mostly because he just loves to hunt.
Yeah.
My daughters, I'm not so sure. Like my oldest daughter is working for us right now, but she's doing online school and she wants to get into like early childhood education. She wants to be a teacher. My daughter graduating this year wants to be a vet. She's pretty driven on that. She got a full ride basketball scholarship, and she'll be, I'm sure she'll end up being a vet. She's that kind of a kid. So we'll see. My youngest daughter, who knows? She just, doing her thing. She's 14.
But, how old are your kids?
20. Basically, they're all having birthdays. 20, 18, 16, and 14. 3 girls and a boy.
I have 4, 6, and 7.
Okay,
so
you're hitting that real fun stage.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Once they're 5, it's like game on. And I coached all their football and basketball for years, and was all busy doing that.
I'm coaching flag football now.
Oh, how's it going? Hold on, I want to give a little context here. He tried to coach. And the coaches union said no. We have enough coaches.
Yeah. So it was an indoor league. They're not playing it anymore just because I got too frustrated with them. But I signed up to coach, put the boys in it. They played in it last year, and I was like, this year, I'll coach you guys this year, and show up for. They do like this little tryout thing where you draft all the kids and stuff and show up, and I go up to the head guy. I'm like, hey, where Jackson and Camden are here. Where do I get like coaching stuff? And he's like, oh, sorry, we had too many coaches sign up this year. We just, took the coaches from last year, so we don't need you. And I was like,
keep your head up. Put your name in the hat again next year, bud.
We got the Walmart checker. We don't need you.
So I guess not qualified for this.
I think that's hilarious.
But then there's an outdoor league that's a little bit south of us that we're playing in that one. They play on Fridays, so. My oldest is 11, and then my middle son, Jackson, he's just turned 10 yesterday, and then my daughter's 8. But the boys are doing well. Camden's team's undefeated. Jackson's team is 2-1. So we're doing okay.
I had a blast with those little boys because it was tackle from 3rd grade on.
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
And and I helped it was first combined 3rd, 4th, and Hank was a 3rd grader. My boy Hank was a 3rd grader. So that year I was just a helper. And then when he went to 4th, those coaches and those boys in 4th moved to 5th only and moved on. So then I was head coach from then on. And we dominated. I had such a good little group of boys that would just run through a wall. But I was so heavy on discipline. And initially it was just like, if you can't make a stretch line, then you can't make an offensive line. And so we'd hammer those little details, but then we started putting in plays, and then we built on it each year. By the time Hank was a 6th grader, he had like 105 plays on his wristband, and those kids knew. We went, when they were 5th graders, we went the entire season without allowing a point scored on us.
Oh, what?
Shit. And the league would be all over us, like telling us we were beating teams too bad. I mean, it snuck up on me because in like 4th and 5th grade, we were beating teams like 70-0. But I would take Hank out because Hank was so dominating.
Yeah.
I would take him out, but I'd put another quarterback in. My whole thing was I told the league, my job here is to trick 5th graders on the other side of the football. It's not that hard. But your other coaches, They can't even line up in an offensive line. We're coming up in a double wing formation, and Hank's yelling shift, and they're shifting into a wing T or a power formation right or left, and so we would move people around at the line of scrimmage, do all this stuff, and the way we did the play calling, all these kids just had to know their own little part of the play call. Like if you're the X, all you have to do is X9. What's a 9 route?
Yep.
You do your thing. Hank was the only one that had to know every play on the field.
Yeah.
And he did. And so, I mean, it didn't matter. I'd take Hank out and it would be whoever else in there and we would. But my thing is I told the league, I didn't care about the offense and scoring points. Like I knew we were going to score. I was so proud of not allowing a point scored.
It's amazing. Because
I'm like, I have 4th, 5th, 6th graders, all those years, we allowed 0 points in 5th grade, and in 4th grade we allowed 1 touchdown on the year. And I said that means that even my little corner, my little safety that's kind of lost, even he isn't getting tricked. Like I said, you just do your job. And Hank was dominating on defense on the line, but like he couldn't cover the right corner or the left corner. Like, and I said not one time. Or actually once in 2 years, we were tricked into allowing 1 touchdown. That is discipline.
Oh, absolutely.
These kids are disciplined. These people are running reverses and, flea flickers and shit, and we're not getting caught. And, God, it was a blast.
That's bad.
Did you play football growing up?
Yeah, but not. I mean, we had 8-man football, and it wasn't real.
That's what I've been to a game of White Sulphur, and it's either 6 or 8.
Man.
I think it's 6 man. Yeah, it's wild.
That's a track meet.
It is a track meet. I was we stopped in at a game, and I was like,
right on the corner of town there.
Yeah, it's a fucking track meet. These kids are just it's touchdown.
That's a big field for 6 people.
Oh
to
yeah,
cover.
I mean, one dude misses. Gone.
And you get one dominant running back or quarterback that's like a serious athlete. I mean, he'll have 500 yards rushing.
They're gone.
Yeah, it's a blast. To
it's
watch.
fun. Oh, it's fun to watch. I had a blast watching them.
I actually watched. I can't remember. Was it 06? Was your first start in Denver?
Yeah,
December.
Yep.
Frickin' 0 degrees.
Yeah, Seattle.
I was in the stadium.
No shit. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
I was in the south end zone, front row, right in the middle of the goalpost, and my brother-in-law, my ex-brother-in-law, big giant bastard. He's like 6'8" and 300 pounds, and he was with me, and he was a Seahawks fan, and I was a Broncos fan, and we were like, let's go to a game this year. Seahawks are going to be playing in Denver, and so we went to the game. I was so stoked that you were going to be starting, and I remember I think you had like a 70-yard pass to Brandon Marshall late.
Yep,
and you guys took the lead, and the crowd's going freaking crazy, and we're right between the goalposts in the front row, and the end zone's going nuts, and I'm making fun of Josh and whatnot, and freaking defense, prevent freaking defense. We they drove the field in about 3 plays.
Yep,
and Josh Brown kicked a fucking felt like 70-yard field goal, and my brother-in-law caught the goddamn ball through the net in the net.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The one Seahawks fan in the entire south end zone that's the size of Shrek. And he's going insane, and the Broncos lost, and he's the only one. And I'm like, I'm going to get my ass beat in this end zone because of this big bastard. But he was too big for anyone to actually pick on. But
what do you think about them you still a Broncos fan?
I was a huge sports fan for years. The last few years, I've been so busy with life that I just asked my boy. Yeah. I'm like, who's good? What's going on? I don't know. My boy's excited about what's going on now with
getting rid of Russell.
I thought they were insane to give. They gave up the world for Russell Wilson. I just didn't understand that.
And then gave him a ton of money.
And draft picks.
Yeah. Now they're paying for his salary. Doesn't even play for him.
Yeah.
Is he retiring?
No, he went to Pittsburgh.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but
Denver's still paying the salary on him.
Yeah, they will be for a while.
Good on Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So does Pittsburgh have to pay him also?
They're paying him like minimum.
Yeah,
they're paying like $1 million.
$1 million or something.
Denver's paying him like 30 something.
Interesting.
No, I I used to honestly, when I was driving around as a lineman, I'd have sports talk on the radio all the time, and I definitely was much more into it. But nowadays, I'm not, honestly. But I would still consider myself a Broncos fan. It's been cool getting to be buddies with Derek Wolfe, and I definitely was into football a lot when Derek was playing, and he was a savage.
He's a savage.
It's a big man.
Matt Prater on the Broncos when you showed up.
Yeah,
I love that guy.
He's a piece of work. That's a whole different podcast.
We'll have to get him on.
That guy has a leg.
Oh my
goodness.
Yeah.
He was a nut job because he came either my second or third year there. And I mean, there was a point in his head 24/7. There was a point I think that he had to see like a hawk or something at practice.
You were telling me,
or like he couldn't kick. It was something. It was something crazy. It was like an eagle or a hawk. If he saw one, we knew we were gonna have a good day.
I've heard kickers are a little like NHL goalies. They're just like odd,
very
off.
Yeah, a lot of them are. They're very. I mean, they have their own process. They're really not even part of the team. They kind of do their own thing.
Yeah,
it's like they practice like once a week because their legs get tired.
It's a good gig to make a living.
Hell of a gig.
You
can play forever.
The best gig in the NFL is a punter.
Really?
Or a backup quarterback.
Or long snapper.
Long snapper now because you don't get hit.
Yeah.
You used to get just smoked, but now you can't line up over him.
I told Hank for years, I'm like, you need to, and I used to work with him when he was a little kid as a kicker out in the yard, but it's more fun to be quarterback and
get the ball.
And then he loves playing like middle linebacker because he loves going and tackling people. But
he wants to go to college, play football?
Yeah. Football or basketball. Yeah. He's really into basketball right now. I think mostly because like that's a sport you can play by yourself year round.
Yeah.
So like he goes to the gym every morning.
Yeah, football takes a lot of people to practice.
It does, and our little town's struggling lately. So they keep changing head coaches, so it's hard to have any continuity. And Frenchtown had a legendary team for decades. They won a ton of state titles, but that all kind of when that coach retired, that kind of went away. But yeah, you can control a lot more on the basketball floor.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that people. Bowling ball cannon at your house?
Yeah.
Where'd you get that thing? Have you seen this?
No.
Yeah. Him and Don Jr. I saw it on Instagram, launching a cannonball over a mountain.
Yeah, Junior.
Where do you get these things?
Junior was at my house a couple weeks ago, and we did that. And he it's funny. I was like, "Do you want to shoot the bowling ball cannon?"
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. He's like, I've done that before. We have one at my buddy's house. We shoot it all the time. And I was like, oh, okay. And I've heard that, but like nobody has one like this. And so we go out there, and he was like, holy shit, this is like legit. And he's like, well, we shoot our bowling ball cannon. We take like a tablespoon of black powder and put it in there, and it like rolls across the field or something. And I was like, he's like, how much black powder are you using? And I said, well, a whole can at 1 pound. He's like, oh my God. And so I loaded that thing with this ball, and it shoots a 12, 14 pound, whatever bowling ball over a mile.
A mile?
It's like a damn howitzer.
Holy
No, it's the mountain across from my house is 1,500 feet up in elevation, and it's 1.5 miles to the top, and 1.5 pounds of powder will put it over the top. It's amazing. So yeah, I had a buddy of mine that had built one, and he brought it out to my house. It's kind of a funny story. I used to put on these conferences when I was just a custom maker at my shop. I'd bring knife makers in to teach classes, and we'd have like 100 people pay to come learn. And again, kind of pre-YouTube. That's how you learn stuff. Sure. So my buddy says, hey, I built this bowling ball can. We should shoot it at your event this weekend. And I'm like, all right, well, let's shoot like Monday before and make sure this thing's safe, So he brings it out, and he'd never shot it. Sets it up in my field. I have like 20 acres and kind of river bottom below me.
And he built this himself.
Yeah.
Okay.
He bought he's kind of a nut. There was a big hydraulic cylinder at a scrapyard, and he saw it there at the scrapyard. So he ran home and got a bowling ball and came back and like slid it into that tube, and it like fit in like a glove, like perfectly. And so he bought the cylinder and took it home and like welded it all up and mounted it on a trailer you can pull behind your truck. So he brings it out, and I was like, well, how much powder do you want to use? And he's like, I don't know. So we poured like 1/4 pound of powder in paper and we put it down in there and rolled the ball in. And we just pointed it straight at my fence line. And we thought like this is going to shoot out and like kind of roll across my pasture fast or whatever. And there's a public fishing access behind me. It's like 500 acres of timber where people walk their dogs. And he torches that thing off, and that ball shoots across my field on a rope through the trees, like shot out of a rifle through the trees, and like hits a big cottonwood, makes a big crash, and we're like, holy shit.
Kill somebody.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, if we put a little more powder in that and tip it up, like it's going to go over the river.
Yeah.
And so we aimed it kind of back behind the ranch behind me where I kind of knew there wasn't going to be anybody, and we put like a half a pound in it. And sure enough, like over the river onto the mountain. So then we're like, well, let's put a whole can in.
See what happens.
Yeah. The problem with his is you put too much powder in, the thing would like want to flip over backwards. And so anyway, we shot that a bunch. And then a few years ago, he calls me one day and he's like, hey, this guy just came into my store. He's got kind of a cool, so he goes, this guy brought a bowling ball cannon that he built after he saw mine, but he did it like legit. This thing's heavy. It won't move. And he's like, the guy wants to sell it. And I was like, he's like, do you want to buy it? And I'm like, well, how much? And he says $1,000. And I'm like, I'll be right there.
Sold.
Yeah. I drove up there and picked it up, and that thing doesn't budge when you shoot it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I saw that video. That's sick.
That's freedom at its finest.
So one of my friends,
Need a cannon now.
he's an EOD guy.
Oh, we should bring it out to your ranch.
Absolutely.
100%. Like you should let me know when you're up there, and I'll pull it over there. I'll pull it over and
shoot some shit.
it will blow your mind. Like especially if you have like a party and there's some people around. And I can explain it to you guys as best as possible. And the first time I shoot it, you lose your minds, and I always have to shoot it a second time because now you kind of know what you're looking for. Because I'm like, the bowling ball will look like a piece of pepper in the sky. I mean, I always watch for airplanes before I shoot it. Like,
check your airspace.
Yeah,
dropping bombs.
Yeah, we are kind of in the landing zone for the Missoula airport. So
one of my friends, he was an EOD guy, and he got stationed up in Williamsburg, which is odd because there's not much around there. And but I think he was doing some stuff in D.C. However, all the battlegrounds are around there. It's Virginia, and he got a call. People would find cannonballs, and he would go dispose of them properly. And one old boy blew himself up. He found a cannonball and goes in his garage, and it was all dirty and stuff. So he takes it to the grinder.
okay.
And there was black powder inside the cannonball.
Oh shit!
And
From what?
From that's the explosives that they put explosives inside the cannonball.
Oh,
And so how it would ignite, I don't know. Maybe the friction when it hit. I don't know anything about cannonballs. But he was on a grinder grinding it to shine it.
static electricity.
And blew himself up. So I say that. Can we put something inside a bowling ball and have it blow up?
Well, I'm sure we could, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere close to it. Oh, we've been trying to figure out a way to have it be lit because we put an Apple AirTag in it in the holes, try and like sealed it off, hoping that we could see where like the AirTag was on the mountain. We've also broke apart like the glow sticks and filled the holes in the ball. Because it'd be really cool to have it like flaming or something at night.
Sure.
You'd have to make a wintertime deal. It'd be a good way to start a forest fire in Jay's ranch. But
What
You
about
paint it with like they make like neon glow in the dark paint.
Yeah.
the problem is you need a light source. Like it, I mean, because you're picking this thing up a half a mile up in the air. Like it would have to be pretty legit.
I think anything flammable would go out. Like if you cover it in Vaseline and try to light that on fire.
Yeah.
You know, but you need an external flame so it lights on fire after
You
it
need
comes
like
out.
a delayed, like if you could put something in it that's a delayed charge.
Yeah.
Where it would like, it'd actually be cool to shoot it like that and then have that charge go off and blow the ball up like a mile from you in the air. If someone had a better background than me, you could get pretty Western with it.
I suppose I might know a guy or two that might be able to help out with that.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty wild. But
So, you store this thing in your lawn?
yeah, it just sits in my front yard.
I love it.
Yeah, when you drive in.
Mike Fisher's got a cannon.
What type of cannon?
I don't know. I'll have to ask him. He's fired it before.
How does everybody have cannons?
I think it's like the little balls.
Oh yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's people have those, and they'll use just a little bit of powder. The problem is when I bought that mountain across from me used to be public, and then a guy bought it a few years later after I bought my property, and that whole mountain's private now, so I have to call and ask him for permission. But it's a life goal is to be able to buy that mountain, because then I can shoot that thing anytime I want. But that's why I need my own ranch.
Where do you get cannonballs? Are you actually shooting
bowling balls?
You're shooting bowling balls.
Bowling balls. And once you own a bowling ball cannon, the bowling balls just show up at your house. Yeah. Like people, I'll come home from town or whatever and be like 2 bowling balls laying in front of my shop door. I have no idea who left them, but it's like,
I need to get one of these things.
I agree.
I had a guy show up at my house. He flew into Spokane and he went to a bowling alley and just asked them if they had any bad balls.
Yeah.
And they had a whole bunch of them in the back. He brought 15 balls to my house. So
that's legit. Yeah. What tags do you have this year? What are you going after?
Really, that moose tag's the big one. I didn't draw. Well, moose, sheep, and goat come out pretty soon. That would be cool if I drew something, but that's like winning the lottery.
Where's that?
In Montana. Yeah. You put in for it every year, hoping in 30 years you draw it. But, nothing really specific other than the moose hunt. That's a big one. Might go out and shoot. Might go out and blacktail hunt with the born and raised guys out in Oregon.
Okay.
And then my kids do really enjoy. I might try and take them back out to eastern Montana, just public land mule deer hunting. They really do enjoy that, because for years before I had MKC, I would just take my kids out with a camper and park it on state land and just deer hunt out there by Fort Peck Reservoir. That's a good time. But yeah, I don't have much for special tags. Have you been to, I think, Maui yet to go after Sika?
Axis?
Yeah, Axis. Sorry. Yeah. Actually, I went a couple of years ago. Sloan Brown hooked me up with a friend of his out there on Maui, and it was really supposed to be a family vacation, but then I was like, I'm going to bring my bow. Right above Kihei there was where we stayed. There was a guy's got a ranch there that I did some axis deer hunting with my boy. I shot at axis, and then he got a pig, so that was cool.
Nice.
My boy's a pretty good little hunter. He 2 years ago, he was 14. Would have been a season and a half, I guess, ago. I took him elk hunting. We didn't get anything. We came home, public land thing, and he said, well, I'm just going to walk out behind the house and deer hunt down by the river on that fishing access. All right. So he got up early in the morning, went down hunting with his bow, and he calls me about 9:30 in the morning, and he'll call a lot when he's down there like, oh, there's some deer on this island. Like, how would you go in or whatever? And he never gets anything, right? So he's calling, and hey, what's going on? And he's, Dad, can I shoot a bear? And I was like, yeah, if it doesn't have cubs. I said, how far is it? And he goes, 10 yards.
Talk to him real quick.
Yeah. You better shoot it. Yeah. And so he's like, hold on. And he puts the phone down, puts it on speaker, and I hear, whack. And he starts screaming, oh my God. Oh my. And I think he's being attacked. I'm like, what is going on? I got it. And I was like, is it a good bear? And he's like, it's big. I'm like, really? Awesome. I'm like, where are you at? And he's like, behind the house. I'm like, well, I know. Like, you're down there somewhere, but where exactly? He goes, come to the living room window. I was like, all right. And I walk over to my window, and he's like, hold on. And I see him, he walks out of the woods and raises his hand up in the air. It was right in the tree line behind my back fence line.
Oh, shit.
This bear, he was walking back from deer hunting and walked up on this bear, and it started snapping its jaws at him, and he kind of shit himself.
Yeah.
And, but he wasn't sure if he could kill one. And so, it was funny because then I go back there and I get there. He had killed a bear when he was 12 with his rifle, and a big bear, and a really nice one. I get back there and I was like, bro, that's a little bear, like a little bear. And he's like, well, I said, I thought you said it was big. And he's like, well, I was pretty scared.
They're all big when you're 10 yards from them.
And you're 14 years old.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, and it was an old, super old sow that had no cubs, and her teeth were, she was not going to make the winter. She had no fat on her.
Good.
It was actually pretty cool. But
you carry a pistol when you go out hunting a lot in Montana?
I don't. if I was in certain areas, I probably would. You know, we have a lot of bears around us, but not as many grizzlies. You know, if I was hunting in the Bob Marshall or honestly kind of down by your ranch or even down like more around Yellowstone Park, I would have a pistol on me, like a 10mm SIG or something.
I was in Northern Virginia, and my oldest daughter, she was maybe 1.5 at the time ish, and I had her in one of those backpack carriers. We were hiking with my in-laws, my wife, and she's just bawling her eyes out. And I think to myself, she sounds just like an animal in duress skull.
Yeah.
And I'll be damned, I look up, and maybe 20 yards away, this big black bear stands up, gets on his hind legs, and starts chomping his jaw.
Really?
And I have a SIG 9mm on me.
Yeah.
And I tell Katie, my wife, I'm like, get behind me.
Might take a few.
And get ready to plug June's ears, because if it steps over this log and starts coming, I'm going to have to get my shit tight and go for it. And came over the log. I'm yelling at the whole time, then it just eased off. But then I bought a Smith & Wesson, I think 460.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you went big time.
Oh, yeah. After that, I'm like,
gun like that big?
It's
Big
a
hog
dirty,
leg.
hairy,
Yeah.
big old thing. And I always think to myself, I'd much rather carry this weight when my kids are around. If it's just me, like, I'll figure it out, right?
I've got a 44 revolver
Up in Montana, I've seen that one.
and then I've got a 10 Glock.
I've never shot a 10mm.
Yeah, I've been shooting a.
I like 'em.
I've been shooting a 10mm SIG, and that thing's really nice. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I think I'll probably carry it. I honestly, the bears don't bother me. It's the mountain lions.
I'm terrified of
Those
mountain
mountain
lions.
lions freak me out.
Me too.
I mean, a bear is going to do probably what you said it's going to do,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
going to have a chance to maybe put some rounds in it.
Yeah.
But a mountain lion's just going to be on your back before you know
Oh,
it.
they're trained assassins.
Yeah, I mean it sounds crazy, but I've been saying like the way I want people to carry our knives, like on your pack strap, accessible, and like I don't want to fight a bear or a mountain lion with a knife, but if you do have that pistol and you end up with a mountain lion on your neck or your back, I mean, you might not be able to get that thing out and actually try to shoot that thing. And at the very least, if you've got a knife or something to start stabbing
A little bit.
Is that where you suggest folks carry them on the straps?
yeah,
of their
right
packs?
on the strap of their backpack or their bino harness, but somewhere accessible.
I've got one of these in Montana. It just clips right on my bino.
Yep.
Harness.
The way that clip is on that sheath, it's perfect for
Yep.
that. But man, something's better than nothing.
Yeah.
I know a few hunters that have been stalked by cats. I know a guy in Lincoln when I was a kid. He didn't get attacked, but same thing. Well, similar. He was cow calling, and he just got a funny feeling. And he turns around and there's a cat. I mean, just crouched, staring him down.
Really?
10 yards. He's like, I never heard it. And he said he stood up and started hollering at it, and the thing like took a couple quick little steps towards him, twitching its tail, and he shoots traditional like recurve bow. And he said it took another couple quick little crawls, and he kicked a bunch of rocks at it, and it was just twitching, and he drew back and shot it, and he shot it right in the eye.
Really?
Dropped it dead, and he didn't touch it, didn't do nothing. He just took his and headed out, and he said the whole way to the truck he knew that thing was dead, and he kept looking behind him. He was so freaked out, and this is a super experienced hunter. Went and got the game warden, brought him back up, and the game warden's like, damn, nice shot. And
That's
he's
what
like,
I'm thinking.
and he said for months he's like, he would wake up and all he could see were those eyes, and he says, I know I shot that cat in the eyeball because that's all I could see, where those eyes were locked on him. He's the scariest thing in his life.
Just as I'm heading to Montana.
Yeah, those mountain lions are.
Oh, I don't like them.
You guys saw a huge one, didn't you?
saw a monster.
Do you have anybody come on your place and run dogs? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way to go.
Have you done that?
I once or twice. I've never shot one that way. I'm gonna do it this winter though. I want to
do it this winter too. But the last 3 years we've had guys out there, and I tell you what, the mule deer population is thriving now.
Yes, they're so hard on me.
Oh, it's so much better. Whenever I first bought it, I bought it in like 16 or 17, and we had a lot of not many bucks mule deer. I mean, they travel a lot, but now we've got some nice mule deer bucks on that property now. I think it's because we're running those cats off.
I think mule deers, they get it the hardest because they're just so damn dumb.
They're dumb as they're the dumbest animal I've seen in a while.
Yeah, especially once they're rutting. I mean, you just
basically
basically can walk up to them.
them. They just pound. They'll bounced off like twice and just
Zero
look at
experience
you.
with mule deer.
Those look at you. It's like, all right.
Yeah, whitetail are so skittish.
Oh, whitetail are gone.
Yeah, those mule deer are so and then they get pushed out by the whitetails.
Yeah.
They're kind of a
Really?
Oh,
whitetails will bully him out of there?
I'll run them.
yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're
mule deer. They're dumb and they're babies.
But that's the thing, the mountain lion populations, and that's the stuff like with everything going on in Colorado with wolves and bears and mountain lions, and it's like, dude, the how hard those animals, those predators are on elk calves, moose calves. Mm-hmm. I walked up last year shed hunting. We were kind of shed hunting and black bear hunting, but I walked up into a kind of just on accident into a kind of an elk calving ground, and there were little baby calves that were, I swear they weren't a day old.
Oh wow!
And I could have run one down and caught one. I mean, they were trying to get away from me over like deadfall timber and stuff, and Hank was with me, and we just backed out of there and just let them be.
Yeah.
But I told Hank, I'm like, if we were a pack of wolves, we'd have killed them all. I mean, they could have taken out 8 or 10 of those things in minutes.
You guys have wolves up there?
Yeah, we kind of run through the property, but we had one last year about this time that
killed some cattle. If I remember right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just eat the kidney, heart, liver, and just
skedaddle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Move on.
Well, they're not much different than dogs in town you see chasing deer.
Yeah.
They do it for fun.
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah. My buddy, he traps them. It's good, but I mean, there's just, you can't keep up with the way that they breed. And,
No.
Hunting a wolf is so hard to actually, especially in areas like ours where it's so thick with timber stuff.
I was talking to a guy who did a trapping hunting trip and up in Canada. You go for a week and you just run a trap line all week.
Cool.
And he got a fisher, a wolf. What else did he get? I think a wolverine. He got a bunch of cool animals. And that's something I'm very interested in.
Yeah, it's cool.
Be a fun little boys trip.
When they legalized trapping up there the first year with my buddy, him and I kind of started trying, and we were terrible at it because like your traps will freeze up. You get a warm day and the snow kind of melts, and then it freezes at night. And there's just so many little things, and then like your scent is such a big deal. And I had young kids and kind of bagged it, but he kept going, and he actually got involved with a guy that's a legit trapper, and they ended up, 2 or 3 winters in a row, they've trapped over 100 coyotes.
Wow.
And then they'll trap 2 or 3 wolves a winter.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really cool. But same thing, those ranches around there that he's trapping on have seen their deer populations have exploded. Because coyotes the same way. They're obviously not as vicious, but they take out a ton of fawns.
Yeah, my farm manager in Kentucky, my farm up there, he traps during the winter, and our turkey population is just through the roof right now.
Yeah.
That turkey hunt last week, I'm still stoked about that. I've never shot a tom before.
Neither have I.
And
really?
No, I'd love to go turkey hunting.
You guys will come out to Kentucky next year. I mean, we've got
loaded.
I think I shot one Saturday?
Yeah.
And
my story is a story of trials and tribulations. His is a little different.
We've got this they're called like scoot and strut things, and it's basically like a decoy, but it's just on a pole and it's flat, and Luke takes the fake feathers off and just puts real ones on there.
Okay.
And so like it's got the face of a turkey and stuff, but it's just like a portable thing. It's like yay big. And he's like, just flash it to him, stay behind it, kind of crouch below. And most of the time, like if it's two gobblers, they'll just attack it. And so 2 weeks ago when I kind of opened, I shot one doing that. And then we were up there this past weekend, and Luke was like, hey, there's going to be 2 gobblers up here in this food plot. It's across the lake. It's like right there. You can walk there. He's like, just take that thing up there and go up there. And Samantha, my girlfriend, she was making breakfast, and Sam had just gotten back. And I was like, well, I'll eat, and then I'll go up there. Had sandals on, shorts, and a T-shirt. And this little 410. And so I go up there, and I'll be damned. Get in the food plot, and I'm kind of crouched down, and there's 2 right over there and a hen. I give him a little flash, get down below it, and he gobbles, and they start sprinting at me. Literally. I shot him from here to the camera.
Yeah,
Works like a charm.
Mine didn't work like that. I walked through about 2 miles of creek bottom because they were out in this field.
You wanted that turkey.
Oh my goodness, did I ever? Then we looked at the imagery, and the irrigation ditches kind of go out and over kind of grid. So we just hopped down in them and walked through the water, and then popped up and they moved down. So then we had to go beat them and get in front of them and come back on them in another ditch, and then popped up and they were 100 yards down. And so got back down in the ditch.
Yeah, this is like mule deer or antelope or something hunting. I mean,
it's like elk.
Elk hunting.
That's what Jay always says. I've never elk hunted, but
yeah, I think turkey hunting's like elk hunting. Just elk hunting's like turkey hunting on steroids. It's the same thing. You're just talking to them and chasing them down.
Hop down in this ditch, go forward another 100 yards, and I pop up. He's about 50 yards away, and I have this Jay's CVA 410 youth version. It's the gun's about this long.
It's this big. It's a
little shorty.
Little one shot, breaks open, got a red dot on it. It's a bad little machine.
I got it there 50 yards away, gave it hell, killed him.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It blew my mind.
Oh, that gun's that's a bad little machine.
So
that's what my boys
immediately
used.
got on the horn of the CVA, and I'm like, hey, this thing is the fucking heat.
Yeah.
And like we're coming out with a new version of the 410 and a 20 gauge version, and
it's that TSS, that tungsten loads, and those things are hot. I mean, you put those things in about anything, and you're gonna kill 50, 60, or 70 yards.
And I like the youth version. It's so small.
Yeah.
You know, even when you're in the blind.
Is it pink?
No, it's more of a like a orangish, reddish. Got to mix together.
Yeah,
but
that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, I just never grew up around turkeys or any of that kind of stuff in Lincoln, and then I need to learn how to call. We actually have turkeys around us now. I just need to get out and start learning how to do
It's
it.
literally just I just use the slates. I can't mouth call.
Do you watch Bo Brooks? You ever watch any of his Instagram? Watch him call?
No, I haven't.
Oh my god, that guy is unbelievable.
Wait, is that the really buff guy? Older gentleman?
No, he's got curly hair. He's a world elk calling champion, and then his turkey calling. My wife and I will just like watch his Instagram page, and she just dies laughing because he even like gets into like the movement. Like,
he's part turkey,
dude. He is. I said your dad's a turkey and your mom's an elk. Like, yeah, the guy speaks animal language. He's unbelievable.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Well, cool.
What else you got going on this year? Any new drops, new knives?
Yeah, we got quite a bit coming out this year with the tactical line. Some stuff in the culinary space. Some butcher knives. Gonna do some stuff with the Bearded Butcher guys. They're awesome. Went elk hunting with them last year. Good dudes. That's the cool thing about this industry is like the people you get to meet and hang out with. Such good people. Yeah.
I'm just now getting into it, and they told your story at Winter Strong this last year and going to the tax, and the community, it's very small, and everyone is trying to level up, and everyone's trying to help everybody and wants to see everyone succeed. I've been overwhelmed with people's generosity.
That community, that Winter Strong, that's the first Winter Strong I've missed in the last few years. My daughter came back from shoulder surgery and was playing her first basketball game back, and she was a senior, so I kind of couldn't miss it. But yeah, it's just such a great community, You
going to be in Big Sky?
Yeah. Are you coming out?
Yep. We'll be there for the week. And
I think you might have come out. Did you? I came back to my booth. It was either there or in Utah, and one of the girls or guys was like, "Jay Cutler just stopped by and bought a knife."
Yeah, I bought one of these,
and I was like, "Well, that's cool." Yeah, that was really cool.
I bought it, and I actually gutted my bear with it.
That's really cool. Yeah,
I wanted to ask a question earlier. You mentioned pictures that people send you. What's the coolest picture that you've received with your knife in it?
I've had some pretty badass military photos of guys deployed. I had a couple pictures actually from Israel that were pretty cool. So there's the military side, just whether it's pilots in their Black Hawk or guys on the ground doing what they're doing. A couple guys, those guys have sent me flags that they've flown like over their base or whatever. And then hunting wise, man, I don't know. so many guys, and then with the stories of like their kids, most of them involve them taking their kids out. Just last week, a guy sent me a photo from SIG, and he was out hunting black bears in Oregon, and all 5 guys in the picture were holding an MKC knife up with the black bear.
That's cool.
So that was really cool. Peter Howell was SIG. That was really cool. But yeah, I don't know if I have a particular one that hits me right off the top of my head. But and then it's cool. Little kids are writing in that have read my story about being a kid, and you know, I'm sure you got thousands of those kinds of letters where you were playing. It's cool seeing people inspired with what you're doing.
Absolutely.
You know, that's the thing. Like, people told me when I was starting at mostly knife makers, like, you know, you can't make knives in America and make money. Like, you have to, because I could right away from the start, I could have had knives delivered to my door that were made overseas, like done, packaged, ready to go, and hit the easy button.
Yep.
But I don't think that's why our brand is popular. I think because of the story of doing it the way we did it. And there's no conglomerate that owns us. No, we're bootstrapping it. We haven't borrowed money, and people have kind of got to follow us from day one and just watch it build.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool. I'm doing I did a speech at a high school to a class, and you know, one of those kids asked me, you know, I've met really cool people, and you know, they're like, what celebrity do you want to make a knife for the most? And I was like, that you haven't. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, honestly, the celebrity thing's fine. Like, it's whatever. But I said, I'd love to see a knife on every one of our active duty soldiers, like carrying a good tool, and even if they're some shithole country somewhere and they pull the thing out and they're whittling and killing some time, and it just makes them think of Montana and hunting, or a company that they know supports them. If it just makes them think of home, that's who I'd really like to see our knives.
Have you looked at getting on GSA and getting that government contract?
Not yet. I mean, I want to start by getting them into the community.
Yep.
A lot like we did the hunt stuff. We didn't spend a dollar on advertising in the first 2 years. I did it by giving knives to certain people around the industry, whether they had big followings or not, just people I respected, and let the kind of product do the talking. Even like through Brian with Hat Creek, you know, I'm going to get him a bunch of knives to give to those snipers that come through. They'll go back to their units and their bases and maybe talk about us. And I want to build that military community kind of more of authentically.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we get to a point where like it does make sense to go into those, you know.
Awesome.
Well, I'm gonna have to look for the next drop.
Yes, sir. Me too. I want some kitchen knives.
So do I.
To buy some of those.
I'm going to.
Yeah, those are. When is this podcast going live?
Probably 2 weeks, 4 weeks.
We'll
somewhere
be.
in there.
We'll have dropped our chef's knives, because those are dropping here in about a week. But yeah, we have some really cool stuff coming. I'm excited about. So.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, man.
Montana Knife Company. Check them out. Instagram, online, and then I guess we'll see you at Big Sky.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on for sure, and the support. I know you've been a supporter, and we've never met or talked, but definitely appreciate it.
Oh,
absolutely.
Great product, great story.
Yeah. Hell of a success story.
Yeah.
Congratulations, man.
I appreciate
super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Well, thank you. Well, you guys will have to come up when you're up in Montana. I'd love to have you come by the shop. I've got a podcast. I'd love to have you guys on.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I mean, we're just 2.5 hours or so from you.
Not far
3.
at all.
Yeah. So come stay and we'll barbecue or something.
Too easy.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, my man.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.